Hi! Finally, here it is. The video I've been mentioning a few times already, and although my channel is not that old yet, you probably have been waiting for it. The why and how things went so bad. There are many things that happened. There are many instances involved. There are many institutions at this moment investigating, including the Department of Justice of the United States, including the FBI, agencies from around the globe, safety agencies, and many more. The reasons are not just technical, they're also financial, political, and even the general public played a role in this. So fasten your seatbelts and let's have a ride through some history, facts, opinions, and whatever will pop up. The 737 MAX is an upgrade of an upgrade of an upgrade of an even older design. It all starts in the 50s, the early 50s, when the Boeing 707 was designed. From there, the Boeing 727 was designed, and from there the Boeing 737 was designed. The Boeing 707 was designed by these people, and the Boeing 737 was designed by these people. The first Boeing to be delivered was the Boeing 737-100 back in 1968. At that moment, the 737-200 was already in development, and shortly after that they decided to actually create the 737-200 Advanced, which became the workhorse and the most popular one from the 200 series. It had a longer range, more fuel capacity, stronger engines. They were still those cigar-shaped engines exactly in the middle of the wing. Very iconic and very typical to the 737-200. Those engines were actually how you would recognize a 737-100 or 200. With a very interesting design also of the thrust reverse, which is like on the DC-9, the Fokker 28, 70 and 100. What most people don't know is that in 1977, what is today called Airbus started to investigate and took the first step to develop what's today known as the Airbus A320. So in 1979, Boeing reacted, and they reacted by creating the 737 Classic, first one with the engines installed forward of the wing, like most aircraft today. This was the first time that Boeing started reacting to Airbus. Although the cooperation of all these companies in Europe was not strong, it was still very fragmented, Boeing knew they had to act, and to act fast. And they took some very good decisions. They designed one of the best aircraft ever designed until then, the 737-300, 400 and the smaller 500, which are still flying today, and many of them being converted also to freighters. The first 737 Classic started flying in November 1984. There was the 737-300, later the 400 followed, and at last 500. A total of 1988 were built, which was a record number back in those days, and still is a very, very beautiful number for an aircraft. During the early 90s, United Airlines switched from the 737 Classic to the much more technologically advanced Airbus A320. And this was a shock to Boeing, that an American Airlines would switch to the European manufacturer, and so they had to react again. This led to eventually introducing the 737 next generation in 1997. And that was painful, because Airbus really started to take close to 50% of market share from the new orders and deliveries. And because Boeing reacted relatively slow, they started to lose their impressive market share, their dominance in the market. So in 2006, Boeing was already considering to build a real replacement for the 737, a clean sheet brand new aircraft, just like the Dreamliner. But they were not sure, they were hesitant, and so they waited. And they waited until Airbus launched the A320neo new engine option in 2010, and collecting orders for over 1,000 aircraft at the air show of 2011. At that moment also, American Airlines announced an order from Airbus for 460 narrow bodies, including 130 A320s neo, and intended to order 100 737s re-engined aircraft. And that pushed Boeing over the edge. They hadn't started the new clean sheet design. Airbus was upgrading, and American Airlines wanted to buy a re-engined version of the 737 next generation. Boeing could not really wait. Starting to develop a brand new aircraft takes 5 to 10 years. If you're lucky, you'll get it flying in 7, if you're really lucky. And so they had to act fast, especially since American Airlines was pushing them. And so they reacted fast, but they were behind again. And that is when the problems really started. As we know, the 737 was designed to have small engines installed under the wing. The Classic and the next generation already required quite some modifications to install the much bigger engine. But that was the limit. So bigger engines were required again. Otherwise, why even bother to replace the engines? Because they needed a high ratio bypass engine, which means a much bigger fan. And so they had to change things to move the engines more forward, increase the height of the front gear, But even at a certain moment they had decided that they really had to increase the height of the main gear. If I'm correct, that was actually only done on the longer version. But bigger engines mounted more forward means not just heavier engines hanging on the front of the wings, but also more forward. And then if you studied physics at school, you know that if you put a weight here, it pushes like this. If you put that same weight here, it has much more impact. So while gliding in an airplane, a passenger airplane has to be able to glide. If all systems fail, it needs to be able to glide and not start pitching and dropping. So it needs to be stable by itself. But also putting those engines more forward and in an angle upwards, because you don't want them to suck in all the stuff from the runways, because Western engines are not able to suck up dirt, where Russian engines, especially the jet fighter ones, they could handle a lot of scrap from the runways. Yeah, you would get different characteristics in flight. More thrust, more forward means the airplane will start to do this at a certain moment if you really push hard. And that is what's happening during takeoff. So this is not a huge problem. You just need to adapt your avionics and whatever you want to change, but do something to counter this. But Boeing had to do something else. The engines could not be as big as those on the Airbus. They were smaller before and they were still going to be smaller now. And it's very simple. Smaller engine, even if you have all that power in the back, but with a smaller main fan, you have less efficiency. So they needed to make it interesting for the airlines. So where do you cut costs? How do you keep your airplane cheaper? By, for example, not requiring training, simulator time, because that is hugely expensive. Imagine you have a fleet of 100 aircraft, 100 737s, next generation. You want to replace them with 100 737 Maxes. That would mean that 100, so at least 400 pilots, would have to be taken off their regular schedule, put in flight simulators, being paid, but also being replaced in those aircraft flying around, transporting people, so that they would learn how to fly this new aircraft, because the characteristics would be different. And that was something they could not really sell. That would cost so much money, and I'm very conservative with these numbers. I mean, probably there are 6 pilots for one aircraft in the fleet, or maybe even more. And if you're a pilot and you know this, please put the numbers. Also, simulator time means you need to rent simulators, and that's very expensive too. So in order to be cheaper than Airbus, or at least come at the same level in the end, you need to cut costs where you can. So you're going to consume more fuel. You're going to be less efficient. It means your aircraft needs to be cheaper, and the additional costs need to be at least the same or probably less to bring some kind of balance. And so they came up with the MCAS system, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Basically, it's what preventing the airplane from stalling. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very smart solution. And they also implemented this on the KC-46, basically the 767-200 cargo version that has been transformed into a tanker for the US Air Force. But they didn't correctly inform the flight crews about this. They didn't design the system properly. So there was software and there were sensors, the angle of attack sensors. And these sensors are known to fail. They're mechanical, they're simple, and they can fail. And there are huge numbers, and I will try to put them on screen now, of failure and emergency landings or interrupted takeoffs because they failed. But there were no fatalities because of them. But we know that there have been fatalities because of malfunctioning sensors. And the Airbus A330 had a case, the Air France one, who left, I believe it was Brazil, and then crashed in the Atlantic. So we know that these things can fail. All those sensors, which are these little pipes, or they look like little sharklets on the front of the aircraft, the outside, yeah, they can fail. Shit happens. On the military version, they had two, like on the 737 MAX. And the system required both to transmit data. And if there would be a discrepancy between the two of them, MCAS would stop working. Pilots would get a notification and would stop working. Also, moving the stick would interrupt MCAS. This is on the military version. And we know that in civil aviation, things are built with even more redundancy than within the military. Like I said, an airplane needs to be able to glide. The military does not require it. Most jet fighters today cannot glide. If the engine fails and they have no hydraulics, they go like this and they crash. Because that increases maneuverability in combat. But when it comes to civil aviation, safety is number one. Not efficiency, not how fast you can go or how faster you can kill the enemy. It's about safety first. And that's where Boeing made a huge mistake. On the 737 MAX, at every flight, one of the two sensors would be used. So this flight, this one, the next flight, that one, they would alternate. I have no idea who came up with this stupid solution. I mean, it's not even a solution, it's just a stupidity. If you know a little bit for aviation, you know there is always redundancy. There is backup on a backup on another backup. There's almost nothing in a civil aircraft that is a standalone system that is crucial. Yeah, there's one tail. Yeah, they haven't designed civil aircraft with two tails. Okay, the Antonov A225. But that was not for safety. That was because there should be the Buran, the space shuttle should be installed on top and should be able to blast its engines and fly off. There would be a tail in the middle, it would be burnt. So every other system has a backup. So why did MCAS not take data from both sensors and have an automatic shutdown if both sensors are not transmitting the same data? And why would it not shut off if the stick was pushed? Instead, the system would start to dive to rectify because things, oh, we're stalling. And stalling means that in the end you will crash. Especially after takeoff, you're not at a certain altitude that you can actually start to descend, that you can lose altitude. You need to really keep going, at least at the same height, but preferably up. And this is where the whole problem is. Because the system would start to trim, and then even after switching it off, there would be so much pressure on the jack screw, which is the one that arranges for the trim, that manual trim is almost impossible. And if this would happen at high altitude, you would simply let the aircraft dive to take off the pressure, and then you can trim back. But if you're at low altitude because you just took off, you have no way to play with this. You cannot say, okay, let's wait for a moment till there is no moment to wait till the tension is off. You need to act now. And so they couldn't. And that's why both aircraft crashed. And of course you could say, yeah, but in the second one they re-switched it on because they were hoping that switching it off and on would actually reset the thing, like most computers do. You know the joke from IT crowd? Hello IT, have you tried switching it off and on again? Yeah, they were desperate. They didn't have the altitude that they could use to descend a bit, lower the pressure, and then, no. But regardless of what the pilots did wrong, how can you design such an important system for flying the aircraft just after takeoff that's taking data from only one sensor? And any sensor, no matter in which industry, can fail. So you need to have a backup. So you need to have both sensors transmitting data. But somehow they didn't. So this is it's not even a blunder, it's not, I mean, even the word stupid it's reckless. Yes, that's the word. It's reckless. So how was this actually possible to pass FAA certification and all the other certifications? I mean, from the other agencies, the EASA and the Russian, the Chinese, the Canadian. Well, they trusted the FAA. And the FAA trusted Boeing. The FAA didn't have enough funds to have enough personnel and the right personnel with the right training to really test everything. So they outsourced a big part, certification, to Boeing engineers. And this is because, on one hand, it's difficult to have the right number of the right experts at an institution like the FAA, but it's also because everything needs to be privatized. Governments want to cut costs, and it doesn't work for certain things. And Boeing needed to get that damn airplane off the ground flying because Airbus was already flying it. Was already flying the Neo. So they had to get the MAX in the air. And so there was a lot of pressure. And they decided we cannot sell additional training. Maybe some time on an iPad that pilots can do when they're not supposed to fly, so that's fine. That will not cost the airline anything. Oh, and also a warning system related to this was not installed. Airlines had to pay extra for it, where on the military aircraft it was standard. And this is a thing where I feel like, okay, now we're really starting to talk about money first, not safety first. When you look at the price of an aircraft and how much Boeing is earning on it, you cannot convince me that that notification would have cost Boeing too much. And they probably could even have charged it to the airlines. And the fact that most pilots didn't know what MCAS was exactly, some of them really didn't know about it, others they knew about it, but they didn't know how it would function, what it would do, and how huge the impact was. That is because Boeing wanted to save costs. They wanted to make the transition from the next generation 737 to the MAX as cheap as possible. Otherwise, they would simply be outsold by the Airbus, which they were already, and which they still are. Not because of the crashes and the grounding. No, they were already outsold. And it's coming more and more to the light now what happened and how corners have been cut. And now Merlenberg, the CEO, was also a board member. He has been kicked out of the board and it's very clear that he will be fired soon because they need to blame somebody. But the whole board is responsible here. But they will just continue to earn their huge salaries, and because of already having 400 aircraft 737 MAXs built and standing waiting to be delivered, and they're not earning money, and they're running short now in space to store all these aircraft, they will start to cut costs by firing those people building the 737 MAX. And this is sickening, because the higher management always want to make more money and want to make the shareholders very happy, who also want to earn more money. And in the end, it's always people who are doing the real work who get fired so the others can earn more. So cost saving is not like lowering the salaries of those who really could earn a little bit less, but it's just firing those who are already earning a little. And that's again proving that at Boeing it's about making money. And yes, they're losing a shitload. They already lost close to 7 billion. And this is not taking account the third quarter, if I'm correct. And we know that the fourth quarter of this year will also be a huge loss. And probably the first quarter of next year too, and the one after that, we'll see. Assuming that they will start to fly in January or February. But from what I have gathered in information, the software fix has not been sent to the FAA for approval, for certification, because it's still not okay. And I said at the beginning that there was a lot going on and a lot of dirt, and so facts have been hidden. That's why the FBI is getting involved. When I talk about facts, there also have been whistleblowers who were silenced, and now things are coming out. And actually, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the whistleblowers were not officially whistleblowers yet, but there were at least people who expressed their concern internally and were silenced or ignored. And today they have become whistleblowers. I believe that is the correct version, but don't pin me on this one. But a very important factor that nobody's talking about is the following. When I say money rules, it rules everywhere. Manufacturers, the airlines, and the flying public. The flying public is not being talked about. Just that, oh, they don't feel safe now. Oh, they're so upset. I remember that when I was young, to fly a less than 3-hour flight, it would cost per ticket a full month of salary of somebody earning an okay salary. Today, and I have been complaining about this too, people want to fly for almost nothing. I know people who fly for 10 to 20 euros on such a flight. I remember myself complaining that KLM was charging 10 or 20 euros more than EasyJet to fly from Amsterdam to Madrid. It's stupid, I know. I mean, it was the difference between 99 or 110 or 120 euros. So 10-20%, you can say that's a big percentage, but it's 10 or 20 euros. And today, I choose to fly from Bucharest to Amsterdam with Tarom because they're cheaper than KLM, but also because for that price I get to take a suitcase with me. And I know that Tarom is safe. Of course, the salaries at Tarom are lower, the costs are lower in general, also at the airport here, so yeah, it's possible. But we're talking about prices that are still 150, 180 euros for a ticket for less than just under 3-hour flight, which is a normal price. I know somebody who makes a similar flight for around 20 euros. So if you want to be able to fly for 20 euros, around 2.5, 3 hours, you know costs have to be cut everywhere. So no food, no suitcases, no drinks. They even made the joke about no toilets, no chairs. But the no chairs thing, they're really considering it to have people standing like in a bus. And yeah, that would just put panels, and you would be standing between panels, so you will not be shaken. You will still have a belt, but will be standing, and maybe a bar on which you can lean or so, like at certain bus stops. But at the same time, Boeing wants to make money. So you're going to fly a Boeing. So Boeing wants to make money. The airline wants to make money. The shareholders want to make a lot of money. And you want to pay very little. So we need to start shaving off a lot of things. And there is this series called Fly With Me. And in this series they make a lot of jokes about like, oh, but you fly with us and yeah, your emergency vest and your emergency mask, you need to pay for them. So first pay, then you get your oxygen. First pay, then you get your swimming vest. So these are jokes, but they're actually very close to reality, these jokes. These jokes are telling you that there is a limit to what you can cut costs on. And Boeing crossed that line massively. It was not just the nose who crossed the line. It was not just the nose wheel that crossed the line. It was at least half of the aircraft that crossed the line. And I'm sure there are other manufacturers who also have been cutting costs and cutting and cutting and cutting and got very close or even crossed this line, but they got lucky. But there are also cases in the past where, for example, Douglas with the DC-10, they knew about the cargo door failure risk and they still got the aircraft certified, and the aircraft crashed at least once because of the cargo door exploding and ripping off all kind of cables on the inside, which made the airplane unflyable, and so it crashed and killed everyone on board. And that's why I'm so curious what Boeing is going to do with the 777X, where the cargo door exploded and had a similar kind of failure. Maybe not exactly the same. Of course it will not be exactly the same, because I assume they would have learned from what went wrong back then. But I really hope they will not make the mistake that Douglas made with the DC-10, that they will just have the aircraft flying while they know they still have to fix that cargo door issue. Yeah. So we the public, we the flying public, are also responsible because we refuse to pay a reasonable amount of money to fly. And of course, we know that the shareholders are earning a lot. We know that the CEOs are driving big cars. We know there is a lot of money going around in the business. But common sense dictates that flying 2 to 3 hours for 10 to 20 bucks is not really sustainable. It also means that personnel will be underpaid. And when you see at a lot of the low-cost carriers, even the pilots are under a lot of stress, which can result in dangerous situations. we know for a fact that Ryanair had to declare a few emergency landings because they were out of fuel, because they cut costs there, they cut corners there. And they have been denying it, but the Spanish Aviation Safety Agency has made a full report on this. And when the airplanes had to divert because of bad weather or closing airports, they had to declare emergency because they were running dry. And I believe, this was like many years ago, and it never reoccurred because they knew this was not going to sell well. Even for cheap tickets, people would reconsider, and they could even lose their license of flying anyway. But it's just to give you an example that cutting corners because of cutting costs is unsafe. But people start to get very creative when they're under pressure. The same happened at Volkswagen with a few years ago the CO2 emissions, and an engineer falsified data, and no, actually he made the car recognize the test bench and then emit less CO2 so it would pass the tests and have wonderful grades. And then some low-level engineers got fired for this, but how did the low-level engineer get to this? No engineer starts doing this if he's not under enormous pressure to deliver something in a very short period of time with limited resources, and then he's not able to do it, so he tries to get some results not to get fired. In the case of Volkswagen, there were no casualties involved. So it was just some fraud, it was bad for the image, and look at me now. Many years later, I'm still mentioning it, and you people are remembering it. So it's again bad PR. But bad PR in the aviation is death, is body bags. It's a lot of families in pain. And yes, bad PR and shitload of money lost. Billions and billions and billions. And I believe it will cost Boeing around 10 billion. This whole 737 MAX disaster. And for 10 billion they could have built a brand new aircraft. They could have designed and built a brand new aircraft which would have crushed Airbus. Airbus wouldn't have been bankrupt, but they would have had to start designing a new one as well. They wouldn't have gotten away with the A320neo. Maybe for a short period of time, but not on the long run. So with this I would like to conclude my video. It was not a very happy, fun one, but with a lot of details, and hopefully you got a better picture on what is really happening and how you and I also influence what's happening. And we need to take ownership of what we do. And it's very easy, yeah, but it's just me, I don't have influence. No. We all do influence by the decisions we take. And I'm not saying we should not fly low cost, but if you would accept prices that will be a little bit higher, things could be safer. Things could be a little bit more comfortable for us and for the people working in the industry as well. Because like I said, cutting costs mean that people will suffer everywhere, being fired or earning very little or working under tremendous pressure. And we don't see this only in the aviation industry, but in the aviation industry, errors can be fatal. 346 deaths because of engineering stupidities, because of bad decisions on higher levels. Yeah, that's something we cannot afford. So let's hope that finally people will start to learn from their mistakes and the mistakes of others, because there have been multiple cases of aircraft failing for the exact same reasons, pushing ahead because they want to make money, not waiting to really solve the problem because, yeah, but the competition is there, so we need to, yeah, okay. The DC-10 had to compete with the TriStar, and I don't remember what the other aircraft were, but there have been more cases where there were this kind of problems. The Airbus A320 at the beginning, I was not a fan of it at all, but it really started with some bad things, like the maiden flight with, back then, the mayor of Paris, the ex-president Jacques Chirac, on board, and all flight computers crashed but one. That's how they landed safely. But later on they crashed an A320 just before landing, and they had to rectify, to correct a few things, and that was very damaging for the reputation. But hey, people were buying it because it was more efficient than 737, so they managed to overcome this bad PR and these problems they had. But the 737 MAX is not more efficient, and with all the changes that are being implemented, there's a high chance there will be training required, and many pilots are demanding this now. So I don't believe the 737 MAX will ever fully recover. I believe the only solution is to really start developing this new aircraft, and yeah, just for Boeing to take their losses and then have a lot of orders converted. But they will not be able to convert them one-on-one because this new aircraft will be more expensive and people will be required to be trained. But then it will be so efficient that in the long run it will be worth it. But then Airbus will be doing the same thing, and probably they already started. So as soon as Boeing starts, Airbus will be starting as well. They're ready. So it's not like then Boeing will be the first, like with the Dreamliner and the A350. No, Airbus will be there, and maybe Airbus can even beat them to the finish line and start delivering earlier. So this is a very tough and rough lesson to learn, but I believe it's a lesson for everyone to learn. And the reason I'm going into this way is because, yeah, it's one of the things I do. I do teach people personal development. I train people on management, on team building, and I help people get the bigger picture. And they say when you point a finger, even if you do like this, not like this, but like this, there are at least 3 fingers pointing back. We always need to look at ourselves as well. And that's why I discussed also the fact that we, the consumers, we, the flying public, play a role in this. It's not about boycotting, it's about making more conscious choices. It's about using some common sense. I'm going to end it here. Hopefully the next video will be fun again, with some nice pictures and some happy information. This was a long video, and I hope that it puts you to think and to reconsider certain decisions you're taking. Not just within the aviation, but in general. And if you're interested in actually going on that other path, then have a look at my other channel. See you in the next video. Have a wonderful day. If you dislike the video, you do this. If you liked it, thumbs up, share and subscribe. Also, check out my Patreon page. There you can support me and get access to exclusive content. Get more. Check it out in the link below.